Somewhat interesting for you guys and not too boring, so if I get boring, just raise your hand. Real quick, how many of you, and I know that we've got one that's going to know this, but how many people have heard of a Convention and Visitors Bureau or Sports Commission before? We've got a couple. Does anybody, besides Cam, right? Yeah. Besides Cam, know what that organization does? Nobody, and it's a pretty common problem that we have. I mean, we're kind of the, we talk about being the best kept secret. So I'm actually an employee of the city of Frisco. Every city kind of has a little bit different structure when it comes to their Convention and Visitors Bureau. But if you guys, which I'm sure you have played in any kind of elite tournament, if you've traveled anywhere to compete in a sporting event, you kind of wondered sometimes, like, why am I traveling to Lubbock to compete in, you know, we have UIL competes out there. Well, a lot of the times that's because of somebody like me. Yeah, we got a band going and everything. So my job is really to bring sporting events to the city that I work for. This is my third city that I've done this for. I did this in Lubbock, and then for the last 3.5 years I was in Fort Worth doing this. And I always kind of kept an eye on Frisco because it's just a growing sports community. So a little bit of background on me, like I was an avid sports fan growing up. I probably can't tell it now, but I was a high school athlete and played intramurals in college and all of that. But I remember watching the Bulls whenever they won those 2 3-peats back in the day, and Jerry Krause was on the TV, and he was presenting the trophy for the championship, and I thought, there's a big, fat, ugly guy who works in sports. Is not an athlete, and I thought, how can I do something similar to that? And that was whenever I was in elementary school. Jerry just passed away recently, but so I always kind of wanted to work in sports, but I didn't know how to make that happen. I always thought I wanted to work for the Mavs or Stars or whoever. So when I graduated Tech, I went to Tech, got a PR degree. Actually, my last semester in school, I went to work for a local hockey team, Central Hockey League, really bad hockey.
Cotton Kings weren't bad. Come on.
It was definitely not Stars level stuff, but went and did an internship there and decided that sports events was what I wanted to do. So I went to work for the team full time. My first job, I was making $18,000 a year plus commission, which there's not a lot of commission when you're selling hockey in Lubbock. And we, and kind of did that for a year, and the team actually folded. Our ice plant broke, and we couldn't run it anymore.
I was director of operations for the Central League that year.
Oh, were you really?
Yeah.
So, and a lot of those guys from the Central Hockey League have gone on and have big careers now. I know that working for the NHL and other things, but
True Living's the GM in Calgary.
Exactly. So, I actually was like, well, maybe my sports dream is over. That was fun. I ran some events. I ended up being their game operations person, which is what I thought I wanted to do. But I knew I had to sell tickets in that minor league level to make myself worth a salary. So I did sell tickets. I said I never wanted to do sales, but I did that because it was something I was passionate about. I went over and worked for the Arena Football League team there that was in Lubbock. It was AF2. I did that for a year, ran all their events. Still sold some tickets because I think that's pretty important for especially a minor league team. You kind of end up being a jack of all trades. I was 23, maybe 24, somewhere in there. And I ended up, by the end of my first year, I was the assistant GM of the team, which, still wasn't making a lot of money. I think I was making about $27,000 or $28,000 a year, which goes a lot further in Lubbock than it does here, but still not a lot of money. Still was not doing all that much. I had a buddy who was working for the Convention and Visitors Bureau in Lubbock and said, hey, there's a sports job open. It's sports sales. You should come do this. And I said, I don't want to do sales. I want to run events. And he said, no, I really think you need to check this out. So I went and interviewed. I ended up getting that job, and I worked in Lubbock for 5 years running events. What we do is, we call it sales a lot of times, but it's really just relationship building. We go out, we meet with people, we say, hey, we have this venue, it works for this event, do you want to bring your people here? And so even though I said I didn't want to do sales, there's a version of sales in everything, and especially in sports. You're going to have to sell yourself, you're going to have to sell something, because it's all about revenue. So I did that for 5 years. And then I was looking to kind of move up and take the next step. I was making, I think, $33,000 a year plus a bonus at that time. Decent, didn't have a family, still fairly young. So it wasn't a lot of money, but Job came open in Arlington and Fort Worth at about the same time, and I thought I really wanted to be in Arlington. I was a finalist for that job. My best friend in the industry ended up getting the Arlington job, and a month later I took the Fort Worth job. Come to find out, Fort Worth was probably a much better landing spot for what I do than Arlington. Arlington has a lot of venues. They don't have a lot of hotels, and you'll see hotels is kind of what drives what I do. So Arlington is a great mecca of sports, obviously, but definitely not where I wanted to be after I got to Fort Worth. Fort Worth was a great place to sell. I did that for 3.5 years and really thought I would stay in Fort Worth for forever. I love the town. I come from West Texas, so it's very Western and very, very much my style. But I've always kind of kept an eye on Frisco. Come to find out, the guy who actually got me the job, or asked me to apply for the job in Lubbock, is now the director of marketing here in Frisco at the CVB. So this will be actually our 3rd time. We were interns together at the hockey team as well. It's our 3rd time working together, which I think just shows you like how important relationships are and how really small of a world it is. I can go anywhere in the country and know somebody and be able to connect with somebody. So I look at every person I meet. I don't turn down a lot of meetings. I don't turn down a lot of speaking opportunities because I look at everything as an opportunity. I've met with people before, and 2 to 3 years later, they come to me and say, hey, random, this is a perfect fit for Frisco. We talked years ago, and now I'm working at this company, and it works. So obviously, you guys should know this by now. Networking, relationships is what it's all about. So talking more about what we do at the Frisco CVB. So whenever Marla, who's our executive director, contacted me, we were actually hosting the U.S. Sports Congress in Fort Worth, which is a gathering, one of our trade shows that we go to every year to talk to event owners and talk to other people in the industry who do what we do. Backing up, 25 years ago, there were not very many cities that thought about sports as a tourism driver. So 25 years ago, somebody started what's called the National Association of Sports Commissions to really focus on how to, bringing events to town, which then bring money into the community. So that went from, there was probably 10 cities doing it 25 years ago, which we just had our convention in Sacramento last month, and there's over 800 cities that are doing this same thing now. They do it on all scales. They do it from, a town of 15,000 that's just looking to get Little League tournaments all the way up to, obviously, Dallas, Monica in Dallas, and folks in Chicago, the folks in Philadelphia. So I kind of backed into this. I wanted to be around sports, and this was a way that I could work and do events. It's also, for me, it's kind of like, preparing for an event, executing an event is kind of like competing, because it's kind of, you get up, you get excited for it, you have to work really hard, you work and put some long hours in, but at the end you get that satisfaction of whether you won the event or not. And then you kind of compare that to how you do with other cities. So what we do, like I said, we go out to these conventions, these trade shows, we meet with a lot of people, and our job is to just see what we can bring to the venues that are here. So it's really important for me to build relationships with Parks and Rec, with the Cowboys, with the Rough Riders, with everybody that has any kind of venue, and not so much here, but especially in Fort Worth. I was looking for people who had old warehouses that they weren't using, because I can do a fencing tournament in an old warehouse if I can bring the right bleachers in and the right scoring capabilities and that kind of stuff. So here there's not a lot of the fan in anything. So all very new and very fun. So so what we do is we look at events, and what we talk about a lot is room nights. So when we look at an event, we look at how long the event is, how many teams are coming from outside of a certain radius, and then how many of those people will need hotel rooms, because the way we're funded is through the hotel occupancy tax. So I'm sure a lot of you are not paying your hotel bills, but if you've ever heard your parents gripe about, wow, there's 13% tax on top of this hotel room, that 13% part of it comes back to us.
Is that is that the tax that helped pay for the Star?
No, I don't even know what tax that was. That's probably a performance
From the mall?
PFC type thing, yeah.
Okay.
Right, currently, Fort Worth is actually assessing a 17% tax, and the state of Texas assesses 6% right off the bat. So 6% of that 13% goes straight back to Texas. The other 7% stays local. We use that for several different things. It doesn't just pay my salary or my efforts. It also pays for the arts in Frisco. It funds part of that. It also funds the debt service on the ballpark, and it funds the debt service on the convention center. So we use our money to kind of continue to build facilities that we can do things in. So that's kind of, we kind of look at events and say, how much tax revenue is this going to bring into the city? Is it a good fit for our city? Does it fit our mission of the things that we want to do? Which in other cities like Fort Worth, there was a much smaller mission. When I got there, they said, we're not a sports town. Arlington's a sports town. Fort Worth is a convention town and a cowboy town. And within 2 years, we were hosting an NCAA women's gymnastics championship that they thought they could never do. So I had to convince people in Fort Worth that sports was a big deal, that sports was a pillar of our community. Obviously, I don't have that problem here because everything that the mayor does, everything the council does, they put a sports slant on it. So that's why it was such an attractive thing to come to Frisco. And I think you guys are really lucky having to be able to grow up in this type of environment. I went to a school, I had 11 kids in my graduating class total. 3 of them were my cousins, so the dating pool was rather shallow. And 4 of those kids, I'd literally gone to school at K through 12, same room, same building, my whole life. So to be able to come to a place like this and see the forward thinking and all of the stuff that's going on here, and just that you guys have classes like this. I had one elective when I was in school, and that was ag. And so I learned to weld every year. That's all I could do because I grew up on the farm. This city is just kind of, it's blowing up as far as sports goes. It's not just local. I was in Sacramento at the convention a couple of weeks ago, and one of the vice presidents from the Sacramento Kings pulled me aside and said, we're watching what's going on in Frisco. That's a really cool town. Everybody in the industry is watching that. So whenever our convention people go out, they say, we're Frisco, and they say, San Francisco? They say, they don't know where Frisco is, but in the sports world, Frisco is really hot right now. I brought a copy of Sports Business Journal that just came out on Monday, and inside, I think a few pages in, there's a full insert about Frisco in this, and so the whole sports industry, the circulation is huge of that. I don't know if I brought enough, but you guys can look at it. That kind of tells the story of how Frisco got to be what it is. And you'll see our logos at the top of that. We helped pay, this is kind of an advertisement, but we helped pay for this placement, and we actually helped all of the pro teams. We paid an additional amount of money to make their ads a little bit bigger so that we could get this insert. But since that came out on Monday, I mean, the phone's been ringing nonstop. There's a lot of things that want to come here. Real quick, I can talk about a few things that we're working on, some that you may have heard about. I can't give a whole lot of details on some of these other things that we're working on, but I have a feeling that in the next probably 4 months, we're going to make several major announcements of events that are coming here that people are going to be surprised about. The NFL Draft is obviously one that's, when Adam Schefter tweets it out that Frisco's the favorite to host it, it's not really a secret anymore, but Monica in Dallas and I are both traveling to Philadelphia today, and we'll be there for a few days to kind of scope that event out. The current plan for that is obviously we would like to host it here. The Cowboys want to host it here, and we're going to support them in that. It's going to cost the city a lot of money to do things like that. So whenever I go to Philadelphia, I'm going to go to the event. I'm excited about seeing the draft, but I'm going to look at traffic patterns that are around the event. I'm going to look at what kind of dumpsters are put out, which I know that my dad said, is that really what you do, go look at dumpsters? That's part of running an event. It's very important that you get trash out of an event. So we're going to go look at kind of that whole setup and see what's going to be needed from our side, what's going to be needed from Dallas' side, and even Arlington to host this event. So it's fun. I get to go to high-profile events, but it's not really fun to walk around and look at dumpsters. So that's what we'll be doing. We think we have a really good shot. Nothing's official yet. We probably won't have an official announcement for at least a month or two, but there's a really good chance that this time next year, right in front of the Star, you're going to have people being drafted in the first round of the NFL Draft in Frisco. So that's really cool. Let's see, what else do we have going on? We've got, you've heard about Major League Lacrosse. That was something we secured recently. That's a good event. Not on that scale of the NFL Draft, but definitely a feather in our cap. We are working on, we pretty much secured Lone Star Conference, which is obviously Division II. They're going to bring their basketball conference tournament from Allen to here. Not a big move, but definitely something. Next March is going to be pretty jammed with events. We're actually working with For the first 2 weeks of March next year, we're working on 4 potential collegiate events that would take place here. Especially the first week of March, you're going to probably be able to see collegiate women's gymnastics, collegiate baseball with Frisco College Baseball Classic, and collegiate basketball all in the same week in Frisco. So, and a lot of what we do is, when I talk about getting those things here, is talking about what kind of city services can we offer them to incentivize them to reduce their cost of hosting the event. And sometimes we provide financial incentives. We're also the kind of the conduit for getting hotel blocks, because if you don't stay in a hotel here, having the event here is great, but you're going to spend less money in our city if you don't stay here. And that's one of the drawbacks of Frisco right now. We only have 2,000 hotel rooms. Dallas has 30,000 hotel rooms. Fort Worth has 13,000, and it's continuing to grow. Now, in the next 18 months, Frisco will probably go from 2,000 hotel rooms to 4,000 hotel rooms. Eventually, I think we're going to need 5,000 to 6,000 hotel rooms just to kind of hold our own, to be able to support the types of things we want to do. But in instances like the NFL draft, we're obviously going to have to spill over into Dallas and into Arlington and into the Colony and everywhere else to kind of get those people to stay close to us. But not only do they spend money, and they spend their tax on the hotel room, but they're taxed on their gas, they're taxed on the food that they buy. They usually buy souvenirs and things like that. So that all is money that comes into the city. There was a Dallas Morning News story, and ESPN reported the other day that Frisco is the front runner to host a new bowl game, which is kind of an interesting thing, because if you noticed last year, 2 years ago, the NCAA said we're not going to create any new bowl games. There's too many bowl games. Austin has been trying to get a bowl game for several years, and the guy down there has been throwing all kinds of money at that. ESPN has purchased the Miami Beach Bowl and is looking for a place to move it to, and Frisco is their prime target. So we've been in talks with ESPN for really the FC Dallas has been in talks with them for almost 18 months. Whenever I came in, I started in at the end of December. Talks got really serious, and we expect probably within the next month to be able to announce that we probably will be hosting that bowl game. Obviously, nothing is set in stone. So, but Friday that news leaked out, and then my phone started ringing, and people wanting to know what that's going to look like. I think you guys all have an opportunity to work with those types of events. Some of you already have, I know. If you're not and you want to get involved, you can get in touch with me, or you can. The city, we utilize the city's volunteer system a lot, and we're going to start ramping that up a lot more. So signing up through the city is a good way to get involved. And then we're trying to build an internship program at the CBB. Whenever I got to the CBB, there was one employee doing sports, and Chuck's been doing it for 3 years now. Chuck used to work for Cowboys, the Legends Hospitality. Now we're a department of 3. I'm the director. Chuck does most of the sales stuff, and then Kristen, who used to work at the Rough Riders, is now handles, like, she's my sports and events person, so she is on site at the events. We do what we call servicing, providing offsetting expenses, getting people connected with the venues that they need. Obviously, a bowl game, if you've ever watched any kind of bowl game coverage, they don't just come in and play a game. They come in for 3 nights, the teams do, sometimes longer. They go and do, just like the FCS championship game, they do main event, they do a bull riding, and ESPN wants to be in there and getting all that B-roll type footage to put into the broadcast. So that's the stuff that we're going to be helping with, is trying to put that stuff together. So a few other things I can't talk about. There's probably going to be another major college basketball tournament that could be coming here next year, but we're actually supposed to find out on Friday if the ADs all voted for that to happen. So, and I will just say, like, a lot of those things don't happen because I get involved. I get involved in a support role in a lot of ways. The Cowboys want something. FC Dallas is really good at going after things. We step in and try to handle things that they're not used to dealing with. They're used to dealing with their stadium. They're used to dealing with their players. They're not used to dealing with the city on a lot of issues. So, for instance, back to the NFL draft. NFL has asked for over $1 million in city services from the city of Frisco to make this happen. Now, and that's completely complimentary. I don't think we're going to be able to do that. We've made an offer to them that's going to be, it's pretty competitive, pretty expensive, but that's why I'm going up there, is trying to see where can we find those, what are the things that we can step in and do that helps them make the event a success. And if you'll, and in that Sports Business Journal, actually